Last week, I took my dog to this fenced-in dog park. I try to go around 5 or 6, because that's most people get off work and bring their dogs. So there's a large amount of dogs for my puppy to socialize and play with. It rained earlier in the day but stopped, so I was surprised to see only one person in the dog park. I knew both him and his dog, and we chatted for a bit while our dogs chased each other around. Also worth mentioning, the atmosphere was just so creepy. A low thick fog covered the entire dog park. It was at horrible weather, that somehow both humid and cold, just a dreary, rainy fall day. It wasn't that dark yet. So when the guy and his dog left, I decided to stay for a while and play fetch with my dog. Mistake number 1, I throw the ball around for a bit, and on one throw something caught my eye. That was a man in all black hood upstanding at the fence, completely still facing towards me. I couldn't see his face, so I don't know if he was looking at me. I tried to brush it off, as maybe he's just watching us play fetch. I do have a 5-month-old puppy after all, who is adorable and draws a lot of attention from strangers. I threw the ball in his direction a few more times so that I could glance at him to see if he wouldn't move on. He never did. At that point, I started to get pretty freaked out. I didn't want to stay alone in a dog park with only one entrance. It was significantly darker at this point as well. I really wanted to get out of there. But in order to leave, I'd have to walk past this man. The dog park only has one entrance on one side. You have to walk the length of the dog park on this path in order to get to where you park. Walking past him was the only way out. So I gather my stuff and begin to leave. I walk to the entrance, glancing at him every few seconds, and he's still standing completely still. But now he's turned more towards me. I took on my phone and pretended to be talking to someone, saying things like, "Okay, I'll be there in 20 minutes. 15, but that's too soon. Okay, Dad, I'll try." The moment I left the dog park, he turned and started walking away towards the parking lot. That was relieved, but only for a moment. He wasn't walking. He was shuffling only a few feet at a time. Then he would stop completely, turn around and look at me, then keep going. Repeat 3 or 4 times. And then his walking changed. He started throwing his head back, looking up at the sky repeatedly, rhythmically, and taking huge strides forward. His movements very bizarre and exaggerated, tiptoe-like walk. If you've ever read The Smiling Man on Our No Sleep, it reminded me of that, like exactly like that. Except it was moving slow, not fast. The moment he started doing it, that story was the first thing that popped in my head. And still, every 5 to 10 feet or so he would look back at me. I was walking behind him slowly in the same direction towards my car. Needless to say, I was pretty much 100% convinced I was going to be stabbed, robbed, kidnapped, or whatever, and was scared to death. My whole body was tense and cold. I've never felt that kind of fear in my entire life. Like deep, horrible pit of your stomach. I could die tonight fear. Then suddenly he turns sharp and runs into the trees alongside the path. I took this opportunity to pick up my pace and pass the spot where he had ran into the trees. Mistake number 2. Barely seconds after I passed him, I hear a rustling, and it comes out of the trees behind me fast. No longer walking like the Smiling Man. A fast, curt power walk straight at me. And this is where I freaked out and started sprinting. Side note, my puppy was clueless to everything and was having a great time. Oh boy, running. He's useless. That was only about 30 yards from my car. I scooped up my dog, not an easy feat to do while running. He's about 40 pounds, and jumped into the driver's seat, started my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. As I was backing up out of the parking space, the lights shined for just a second on the man who was standing at the end of the path, the beginning of the parking lot, completely still, just staring. I may or may not have called my mom and cried the entire way home. I was so shaken up. I didn't want to walk around at night for a few days. Even writing this has made me incredibly uncomfortable. I told people that I frequently see there about the encounter. And now I make sure that I am nevertheless person in the dog park. This happened when I was about roughly 9 to 10 years old. My brother Luke was around 2 years younger than me. So he would have had to have been about 7. We live in a pretty safe suburb in a small city in Australia. Most often, particularly in summer, us kids will be out after dark playing Spotlight and other night games with our neighborhood friends. We live in the street where most people knew each other and would look out for the kids in the street. One particular time during summer after dinner, my brother and I went back outside to play. School holidays meant we didn't have to come back inside to about 8 p.m. because none of our friends would come out to play. We decided to take out our dog for a walk to the park. This park was about a 10-minute walk from our house. To get to the park, you could either walk by the pathway, which went behind houses on neighboring streets. He then went through an underpass, which had a main road on top. Another way to go was via a main road that our street ran off the main road when parallel to the pathway and hooked up to another main road which crossed over that pathway, creating that underpass. My brother and I decided to go the back way through the underpass, so we could race each other this way. Both my brother and I played sports. So even though we were young, we could run fast. But halfway to the park, I was slowing down because I thought I heard rustling in the bushes behind me. I didn't think much of it and continued on. We got to the park and hung around for a bit. When it started to get dark, we decided to head home. As we got closer to the underpass, my brother was lagging behind me. I noticed a big figure in the underpass with what looked like a big dog. We kept the walking for a bit, and my heart started to beat a bit faster. My brother hadn't noticed at this point. When my dog started to get anxious, my brother looked up at this point and kind of looked at me. We kept going, but a lot slower this time. As we got within 15 meters of the underpass, I could tell this person was a male, quite tall and large. He was leaning against the wall of the underpass, facing us. That was already feeling really off. But my stomach pretty well fell into my but this point, we had to make the decision to either turn around, go through the underpass, and pretty well come into straight contact with the sky or go back via the main road. I said to my brother, Luke, let's go to the main road. He agreed straight away. So we veered a slight right, which led us up the slight hill to the main road almost on top of the underpass. We crossed the road and started heading straight home. We both immediately felt a lot safer. We hadn't gone far when I started feeling funny again. I turned around and back in the distance, this guy was running towards us. I freaked out, called out to my brother to look behind him. And he just turned to me and said, "Let's run." We both bolted. I turned around a couple of times. And this guy was close enough to us that he could have caught up to us, but still far away enough that it would have looked weird the cars passing by. By this point, we had turned into our streets and looking behind us, still going as fast as we could. When we got to our house, we were both exhausted. My brother went straight inside. I turned around and noticed that the guy was about 100 meters behind and was slowing down to a stop. I quickly went inside. We never saw this person again that I know of. But from then on, we were a lot more hesitant to go out late. I am quite a loner and like to go on walks just to get some me time. This one time on the 27th of November, I decided to go on another lengthy walk of mine. That was something eerie this time though, because I had a feeling that the 27th of November is a night that something grotesque was going to happen. And boy was I right. So at around 2 a.m. I was restless and made my way into the cold night with that same feeling of dread I had had earlier in the day. The first hour of my walk was pretty normal, nothing out of the ordinary. But lo and behold, I had a feeling that it was being watched. Bearing in mind that was about 3 a.m. now, I was sitting on a bench that was in a park that wasn't very well lit. Someone else being in the park was very unlikely as it's a small town and the only people who would be around this time is drunk idiots who do my head in. Anyways, there was no sound coming from the dark figure that caught my eye. He was just standing there staring in my direction. I looked down at my phone to put my torch light on and pointing my light towards the dark figure. But to my surprise, he had vanished. Me just being paranoid and extremely tired. I just ignored the weird encounter and decided that would be best to make my way home and get some shut-eye, placing my phone back into my pocket and lighting up another cigarette. I made my way back to my house, but still had this uneasy feeling of someone watching me. I'm normally not easily scared, but this felt different. Like someone had decided to taunt me. I looked behind me to see the same dark-figured man standing right beside a tree, just looking my way. Knowing though this isn't something my mind had made up a shot to the figure. Amen. Is there a problem? You could tell there was fear in my voice, but I wasn't going to let this creep get the best of me. No response from him. This was just getting weird now. I stood there and my eyes widened. The man got to the floor and started crawling towards me in a manner I could only describe as insane. The only thing I could hear was this hissing noise, which I presumed was coming from him. I just stood there wondering what on earth he was going to do to me, but my current state, I just looked at him with fear. As he edges closer, I vaguely noticed something was dangling from his rucksack. I guessed that it was some bird or some sort of small creature. Anyway, I didn't want to hang around to find out, so I dashed up a small lane right to my house. Looking back on the ordeal, maybe I shouldn't have headed straight back to my house, as he would have known where I lived. But my head was in a messed up place from all the fear this man had caused me. I ran through my gate to my front door and quickly glanced behind me to find him standing just outside my gate. One thing the man said to me will always send chills down my spine to this day. He murmured the words, "One day, we will meet again. And this time, you will be coming home with me." And the events of this night stopped me from going on walks because I still, even to this day, 5 years on, fear that he will come back and take me to some sinister place where he can do whatever he wants to me. This took place when I was in my early 20s, that was walking back home coming from a friend's house. Normally it takes about 30 minutes to get home, but I had a few drinks and was zigzagging across the road. It was still dark out, but I could see the sun touching the horizon in the distance. After 15 minutes of walking, I ended up on a crossroad. I had the choice of going dead ahead, which led me straight to an apartment complex, or take a left and go through a medium-sized park, eventually leading me to my complex. My girlfriend gets angry when I come home drunk, so I thought a walk through the park was sobered me up a bit. This decision changed my night drastically. I followed the trail alongside a small pond, which led me to some stairs uphill. Here I paused for a bit and lit up a smoke. In the distance, I could see a girl entering the park and jogging towards me. We greet each other, and I continue climbing the stairs. After some time, I reach the top and feel a bit nauseous. I take a deep breath. And then I heard a short scream, followed by glass breaking the distance. I look around to try to find out where this noise might have come from. I feel reluctant to go back down, but are haunted by this weird feeling in my gut, not the normal feeling alcohol gives you. After having a fierce discussion with myself, I make my way back down the stairs. Once down, I start following the trail, which leads me deeper into the park. It's still dark out, and my vision is limited to the dim street lights across the pond. 5 minutes into my walk, I start having a discussion again. Today, imagine hearing a scream. Am I that wasted? I stop and light up another smoke. As soon as I use my letter, a whisper breaks of silence. I couldn't make out what was said, but I could hear the direction that came from. I go off trail and wait for my eyes to get used to the dark. Another whisper breaks the silence, and this one I could make out. Slidell Carl, everything will be fine. Just keep your mouth shut. Chills run up and down my spine as I make my way to where the whispering came from. My eyes are used to the dark, and I end up with a small clearing between the trees. Here I wait and listen. The silence made me feel nauseous again and lean up against a tree about to puke when I see movement in the corner of my eye. I dropped down on my knees and crawl as steady as possible to where I spotted movement in the world. Felt like it was spinning, and I could hear the blood gushing in my ears. Then I spot him on top of her pantless and dirty to the bone, pressing both his hands on her face. No discussion this time. I get up and start running like a madman toward the horrible scene in front of me. The man looks up and lets out a scream. I ram my knee into his face, and he drops like a bag of potatoes. I get on top of him and start swinging. Everything turned black, and I feel his warm blood dripping down my fists. And then a sharp cold pinch my lower back wakes me up from my blind rage. I turn around and I'm greeted by another man holding a broken bottle in his hand. No shirt and as dirty as the man laying in front of me. He jumps on top of me, and I feel another cold pinch on my shoulder. I puke and the man hesitates for a second big mistake. I grab his head and start pushing his eyes inward. He lets out a horrifying scream and drops down next to me. My blind rage returns and I starts winning again. My mind racing with thoughts. I wake up in the arms of a man. I struggle, not knowing who he is or where I am. He tells me the cops are on the way and I should try to remain still. The last thing I noticed is the sun shining through the trees above me before I blacked out again. I wake up in the hospital and then greeted by two officers. I explained to them what had happened, and they told me I was brave but stupid. A part of glass was sticking out of my back when a jogger found me. It didn't miss my spine by a couple of inches. Luckily, the girl had managed to sustain no major injuries. I did, however, kill a man I found on top of the girl. The paramedics had tried to resuscitate him, but he was already too far gone. The guy that had stabbed me needed to go into surgery, seeing as one of his eyes was badly damaged. I made a full recovery and regularly talked to the girl jogger, who is now one of my closest female friends. Thank God for me being an annoying drunk and not listening to the voice in my head. This happened to me 14 years ago when I was in 4th grade math, and it was very common that every morning before school started, kids would be dropped off at the park. From there we would walk to the school before the bell rang at 8:30 a.m. Keep in mind the park is right next door to my old elementary school, so there really wasn't much of a distance or any danger for that matter. The one and only road that led to the park and school had lots of traffic and people walking around. It's my mom drops me off, and since we were pretty early and my friends were already walking towards the swing set in the park, I told her I would go there and wait with them for the bow. Mom said it was fine, but to not get the class later, I'll say would be grounded. I quickly agreed, sit divided my mom and headed straight to my friends. Now in this park way in the back there is, or was I haven't been there in years, a wooded area that you can go in for maybe half a block, and then you run into a fence that separates a farm in the park. It was a very cool area to run and play in. The swing set, when my friends were hanging out, was maybe 30 feet away from the trees. As I was getting closer to my friends I saw something shift next to a tree, and I stopped to get a better look whatever it was. And that's when I saw him. That's all man was greasy brown hair and dark clothes. He was way in the back of the park in the tree line. Just looking around, not doing anything that would cause alarm. So I dismissed him was just a man walking around, or one of the farm helpers that we would usually see from time to time feeding the chickens or fixing the fence, and went on to talk to my friends, but I kept getting a bad feeling. Fortunately, my parents were very good at teaching me to listen to my instincts and be aware of my surroundings whenever I am near strangers. Feeling a bit weird about the man, I told my friends that we should start heading out to the entrance of the school, but because it was 7:45 they didn't want to get stuck in the cafeteria waiting to be allowed into the playground. I started to get upset because the bad feeling I had was getting worse. I felt kind of trapped, and it was clear to my friends that something was up with me. But they dismissed it as me being in one of my bad day moods, and continued to goof off and be loud, and looked around still feeling nervous and looked towards the woods. He was still there, except this time he was looking at us. He had a cold look in his face, and I could tell he was angry. That's when he saw me staring, and I quickly looked away trying to play it off. Unfortunately, that gained his attention and slowly made his way to us. When he got close, He smiled at us in a very friendly voice, started to ask general questions about what we liked, what kind of video games we liked to play, what school we went to and stuff like that. I stayed quiet and just listened to my friends answer his questions without hesitation. The man then turns to me, the only girl in the group, and with a creepy smile tells me that I have beautiful black hair and a pretty face. I quietly and nervously thanked him without looking at him and moved closer to my best friend Josh. He was a 6th grader and the eldest of the bunch. When Josh saw how nervous I was, because the man he held my hand and moved me behind him. The man looked annoyed that Josh did that, moved around him to be closer to me. At this point, I looked over to our other friends, and they finally realized that something was very wrong. But they were just as afraid as I was to do or saying anything. The man kept saying that I was so beautiful. And I looked like a pretty doll, and just kept saying all these compliments. The stranger should never tell a little kid without the parents present. And even that's iffy. At this point, my instincts were telling me to run or to cry out for help. But I was petrified and couldn't move at all. The man then started to touch my hair while complimenting me and said how he would like to take me home. I could be his special little doll. He would buy me toys and lots of pretty things. He then grabbed me by the arm and pulled me close to him. Thankfully, when he did that, it snapped Josh out of his fear of what was going on, and he hauled me back towards some fast, and we all took off running. He was so fast that I guess the man didn't expect it. The man cursed and yelled and started running after us. I swear it felt like we ran forever to the entrance, and I felt somewhat relieved when we were that much closer to the school and to safety, but the man was still behind us. I was sure that he was going to catch up and hurt us for running away. But when I looked back, he had stopped near our bench with a hate-filled look on his face. We finally made it out of the park and just ran straight to the entrance of the school, where one of our teachers, Mrs. D, was barely making her way out to help with the street crossing. When we saw her, we ran to her, and I just collapsed on the floor sobbing while the boys told Mrs. D what happened and what the man looked like. Miss D immediately informed the office. The entire school went on lockdown and the cops were called. I stayed glued to Josh when we spoke to the cops and waited for our parents to arrive. And thankfully, the teachers were very understanding of why I needed to be close to my best friend and left us alone. My mom and dad were so scared and furious that this man had tried to take me away. And we're thankful that Josh reacted quickly and led us to safety. After that incident, the school took steps to make sure all kids were dropped in front of the school safely. The school district sent out letters to parents telling them to not allow us to be in the park unsupervised, and a patrol car was assigned to our school. Other the cops searched for the man, he was never found, which terrifies me, and to this day. I can still remember the look in his eyes as he saw us get away. I don't know what would have happened to me had Josh not been there to protect me. And I am so thankful I had and still have such an amazing friend looking out for me.